Hello, welcome to Community Forum. My name is Roy Cohen, and we will be again doing the virtual show because of the pandemic stuff that's been going on, and someday we'll be able to get back into the studio. But meanwhile, we got a nice looking background. It's kind of timely. It looks like foliage time. And we have with us today a special guest, Rabbi Jonathan Hausman from the Ahava Torah congregation in Stoughton at 1179 Central Street. And we're going to be talking about some very timely subjects. Rabbi, welcome to the show. I wish we were able to shake hands, but we'll have to give ourselves a little virtual bump of the elbows or whatever to make it look good.
Sounds okay by me, Roy.
Okay. Let's start off with, I guess, a timely subject, high holiday. Operating the synagogue under COVID and pandemic conditions, I'm sure it's been quite a few changes in your life and the life of the congregation since this all started in March, but we seem to be hanging in there, I would say.
Well, listen, this has been, it's been an interesting experience to say the least. Certainly not anything that most of us, our age or younger, our age, even some people the next generation up have ever experienced, where you have an entire country basically was shut down for a while. And when you do what I do for a living, along with a number of the other clergy whom I know, more nationally than locally, everybody, whether they're Jewish or not Jewish, everybody's basically struggling with the same issues. You know, how to maintain community without brick and mortar, without physically entering a building, how to provide the services that people have come to expect from houses of worship when the clergy of your choice, whether it's a rabbi, a pastor, a minister, whomever, can't make the hospital visit, not allowed into a home, dealing with families who feel disconnected and betrayed by, and really sense this betrayal by the institutions that are not only there to care for elderly parents or ill siblings, but now when it comes to end-of-life issues, you can't even enter those facilities to be with loved ones, as their, time is coming to an end here on this earth. So, there's just a whole range of emotions, and, you can migrate much of what we do to online platforms, whether it's live streaming by way of Facebook or YouTube and things of that sort, or providing some kind of spiritual sense, worship services by way of Zoom or live stream, depending upon how participatory you want it to be. But it's not the same as being within the physical structure itself. For us Jews, there are certain prayers that we can only say if we have a minimum quorum of people, which happens to be 10, in more traditional settings, 10 men, but 10 nonetheless at or above the age of bar bat mitzvah, in order to recite specific prayers. And people need to be in physical proximity to one another, across the computer screen. Most instances just doesn't cut it. So, there are a whole bunch of emotions that are taking place. And for us Jews, listen, Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, the Jewish high holidays, as you know, are right around the corner. Now what?
Right.
You have mandates from the governor and mandates from the state legislature that require certain, a minimum number. And mind you, I'm not complaining about it. It is what it is. Okay, but there are now space requirements per person if people enter your building, which really means you need now to count heads in terms of how many people can enter. Now then you have to make the hard choices of who can enter and who has to watch online. And Jewish culture, by and large, is really a very social culture. The life cycle events and the large events during the year in which we participate are social in nature, meaning they're communal in nature, meaning that people come together for them. It's for britot, the ritual circumcisions, and baby namings for girls, and bar and bat mitzvahs, and weddings, and funerals, and shivas, the period of mourning in somebody's house. These are all community events that, for the most part, have fostered over the millennia, this ability of people to come forward and interact with one another physically, in physical proximity. And we just don't have any of that now. So it's leading to a very strange conversation and strange admixture as we approach Rosh Hashanah at the end of this week.
It's a very frustrating situation for you. I'm sure you're not doing what you were trained to do. It's all improvisation, and it just has to be what it is. And we hope we make it through this thing. I'd love to see it gone, but it won't be. It sounds like it won't be for quite a while.
Listen, we don't know. My youngest brother happens to be an epidemiologist. He's one of the lead guys in his division when it comes to airborne transmissible illnesses. So he's been right at the crux of this research and approvals with one of the government agencies. And he said, it's a coronavirus, and coronaviruses are difficult on a number of levels. He said, and the most difficult piece of a coronavirus, or the dealing with coronaviruses, is they so easily mutate. He said, if it was easy to cure a coronavirus, then we would no longer have the common cold, because the common cold is a coronavirus.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, he said there's just a lot about it. He says as the days, weeks, and months have gone by, they've learned more and more about this particular coronavirus. But, who knows? People have talked about the new normal. Well, first of all, I don't know what that means. Okay. I think what people really mean is there's just such a sense of dislocation. When will it be that we can get back to some kind of routine that we can consider a regular routine? And, we're not there yet. And the question is, with regard to this particular illness, are we talking about a vaccine, which means a cure, or are we talking about remedy situations that can help people heal from this, like remdesivir or Plaquenil, or maybe something else there are numerous things that I've seen in the literature that have been out there. A lot of medical care developments coming out of Israel in this regard. But, who knows? Who knows? You know what it's like for somebody to be ill, and, as the rabbi, you say, listen, I'd love to come over and visit. No, Rabbi, you can't come over and visit. Happy to speak to you on the phone. No visits. Just very strange.
It's awful.
Yeah.
It's really awful. So maintaining the community and serving under what we call duress, I really hand it to you because I know that you're keeping things going. But it's got to be really difficult.
It is. But, you have to, the wrong word is creative. The right word is forward thinking, flexible forward thinking. Creativity, in my view, when it comes to this, is to take the platforms that are available to you and transfer what you can over to those platforms in order to maintain and hopefully build your community. So for example, we use Zoom for our regular daily worship. We've just, thanks to a couple of donors, we've just installed live streaming equipment into the synagogue, which can be used not just by us, but the church to which we rent as well. So things will be able to be posted on a YouTube channel or Facebook page, something of the sort.
Mhm.
Adult ed. I'll be honest with you, when it comes to what most people would call adult ed, what a few of us at the synagogue would like to call continuing education, we've moved over to this platform, to Zoom. And I'll be honest with you, for this particular kind of service, continuing education, I don't know as if I'd go back to, other than Hebrew language instruction, I don't know if I'd go back to what would have been termed the regular method of service when it came delivering this particular product. Because, we would get 3, 4, 5 people during the old method of offering continuing education. We're getting 20 to 30 people at nighttime currently now. So, it opens up a different realm of possibilities. But, it's allowed, what this has allowed is those people who are flexible thinkers to sit back and say, okay, well, now this all happened and none of us can walk into the building. What is it that, for example, the millennial generation is considering that prevents them from coming in? And can this perhaps change that dynamic such that now we can not only, serve and service and entice that generation to affiliate, but how can that change what we do with our current congregation? In other words, will this change the mix in terms of outreach to those who are unaffiliated and inreach to those who are already affiliated to create something new and create something different to help this thing grow?
Do you find that the membership is steady or growing or fading away? Or, I mean, it sounds like you've got a good thing going despite the conditions you're working under.
Look, I'm not going to tell you it's been easy. In terms of membership, I mean, thankfully, we have a number of very creative people at the synagogue who have turned around and said, okay, the old way of delivering the message that we're here happens to be use of the marquee in front of the building, placing ads in the Stoughton Penny Saver. Well, of course, the Penny Saver doesn't exist anymore. The Suburban Shopper, I think, is in town. Those kinds of things, articles in the newspaper, things of that sort. And it's not to say that you don't do those things, but, how can Facebook be used more effectively? How can a YouTube channel be used such that people will watch? It's these kinds of things that are now in use. How can we use the ability to text by whatever application people use on their cell phones to be able to get a message out, in the similar vein that a physical therapy office does, or a dental's office does, or a medical office does, things of that sort. If you're a lawyer, you're no longer able to go into court. How can I argue best? How can I still zealously represent my clients? And this context, what can we do to help grow the community? And all synagogues are going through this. I think all churches are probably going through it as well. And it also deals with the impact on your budget line. While it's a house of worship, there are still bills that need to be paid and people that need to be paid. And you can't exist alone on annual dues, which happens to be our structure, of course. So what creative things can you do to augment that which is flowing in by dues, or if it's a church setting, your weekly tithing? And we've done some creative things over the past few months because we don't have bingo anymore, and some of the other sources, some of the other programming that we've undertaken to bring arts and culture to the community, for example, what we can't do anymore. And not only would it bring arts and culture, arts and entertainment to the greater community, but listen, these things are fundraisers as well. So you don't have those things. What can you do? Back in June, we had what we called Shabbat in a box. People made reservation. You could get Shabbat dinner for 2 or 4 right in a box. Everything, all the fixings, okay? From Shabbat candles to the little bit of grape juice, all right, to say the blessing over wine or grape juice. That's in a complete meal with dessert, salad, whatever, for your house. And, we actually did very well with that. We sold close to 150 meals.
Wow.
150. Oh, yeah. It turned into a nice little fundraiser. Okay. In May, we had it.
Are you doing it again?
Well, we have ideas out there to do something similar.
Yeah.
Okay. Around the concept of barbecue. Not ready for advertising at this point in time, but we're considering doing some similar things. Another thing, we had a number of people who had underlying medical conditions and ended up contracting COVID-19 and ended up surviving, healing. So we put together a little campaign that was just called Count Your Blessings. Okay, count your blessings. A child or grandchild getting married, donation of $50, okay? Graduation from high school, $5. Graduation from college, $10. We had some 64 categories of just these throwaway happy events in people's lives. And we just arbitrarily added a monetary amount. Called your mother, $1.
Interesting.
Although, depending upon the parent, might have donated $5 for not calling the parent. For you don't know the relationship. When you added that all up back in May, we ended up raising $2,500 with that.
Well, that's good.
Yeah, so you have to be creative with your extraordinary fundraising. So, we've been doing some of that as well.
You mentioned the church that is renting space from the synagogue on Sundays. Is that working out for them?
Yes.
No.
Yeah.
They're bringing people in to pray, and I'm sure they're maintaining social distance while they're doing it.
They do. So right. So I mean, first of all, let me take a step back and start from the beginning. It's an evangelical ministry that was looking to plant a church here in Stoughton, for those who don't know. And they've been with us for the better part of for the last 5 years. There was 1 year they were in Boston, and they ended up coming back to Stoughton into the synagogue. It's just been a marvelous relationship, where two congregations, one would think so different and distinctive, really have been able to come together and share in some unique ways. So it was more urgent that church be able to get back into the building to resume some kind of weekly worship than for the synagogue. So we worked out, and we have a reopening committee, and Pastor Hopkins is part of the reopening committee, and his wife is part of it as well. So it's not just synagogue lay leadership and professional leadership determining the course of actions with regard to the processes of opening the building, traffic flow through the building. Church has a stake in this too. So if you walked in, you would see the back wall of the sanctuary has been completely opened. We're able to have 40 chairs based on 40 people based on the available space. We've configured the seating such that people are not on top of one another. Church has been meeting every Sunday since July 12th, and just on Sundays. But when they have church in building, they also are live streaming as well by way of their Facebook page. The synagogue, we meet on Wednesday evenings in building. because the 3 days between church and the synagogue coming in, and then 3 days between synagogue and church coming back in, it's enough time for cleaning, disinfecting, and things of that sort.
Mhm. I would assume that their congregation is maintaining good health, and
Yeah,
also, and
yeah,
also
listen, we've both congregations have had our scares, but as Pastor Hop would say, knock on wood, so far so good.
okay, and we're having in-house activities on Wednesday nights. You say, are there any other times that that's going
No.
on?
What we're going to do, what we will do for the high holidays is we will have a hybrid service. Now, what that means is there will be a limited number of people allowed in the building. Okay, not more than 35 for both days of Rosh Hashanah, for Yom Kippur Eve and Yom Kippur Day. It's done by a reservation basis. People have not reserved their space. They're not getting in. People will come in, face masks, hand sanitizer. We have everything. There is physical distance between the seating and the pulpit. Pulpit will also have plexiglass stands so that I and the high holiday cantor are protected to a degree. We've limited access to the pulpit itself. We've been working on this for about 12 weeks to get this plan into place. Those people who are not going to be in-house, in building, which of course is the majority of the congregation, will of course be able to participate by way of live stream. And the main services will be live streamed, but we'll also have some of the ancillary services that will be broadcast by way of Zoom.
Okay.
And that's what we're going to do.
So people that want to participate need to get in touch so to get the codes to get in, right?
Right. Absolutely. And listen, not for nothing, how long can people sit and watch a computer screen? So there'll be some nip and tuck done to the liturgy itself. Certainly, I'm not going to speak as long. Not that I'm a long speaker anymore.
Wait a second.
I was a lot longer 20 years ago than I am today.
I've heard some of your sermons, and they do last a while.
Yeah, but the past 4 or 5 years, I average on the high holidays literally 22 to 23 minutes for sermon. And I don't even. Roy, we have somebody on the pulpit that times it. Okay, and I have a bet with our high holiday cantor. He has a bet with me. If I can average under 30 minutes per sermon, he owes me a bottle of Macallan 18 Scotch. If I average over 30 minutes per sermon, then I owe him a bottle of Macallan 18 Scotch.
And I wonder what he's doing with the collection of Scotch bottles that you're giving him.
No, I actually, every year we've done this, he's owed me. I haven't owed him.
Huh, interesting.
So, well, listen, but the bottom line is, in all seriousness, how long can somebody sit and watch something like this on their TV screen or the computer screen? So, I'll be adjusting the sermons downward in terms of time as well. I do have colleagues who've said, listen, I don't care. It's COVID. Whatever I had planned to say previously before this, I'm just going to go and say it. And if I take 45 minutes, it's going to be 45 minutes. I've been on phone calls with colleagues, conference calls with colleagues who really manifest that type of attitude. But I don't think it's an attitude that's going to win many points, to be honest with you.
Yeah. The other religions in Stoughton and surrounding towns, are they surviving? Are they being as creative as you sound like Ahava Torah is being?
I have to be honest with you. I don't have many relationships with many of the other houses worship around, and I know a couple of the rabbis around. I basically have always been a let me just do my thing kind of deal. The church to which we rent, I'm close with them, and I know that the pastor Pastor Hop and I have exchanged ideas back and forth quite liberally, to be honest with you. I do have a cadre of fellow clergy across the country, in Tennessee, and Michigan, and Texas, California, whatnot, and amongst that, and some are rabbis, some are pastors. So, I mean, we share back and forth by way of phone calls and emails and Zoom conference calls, as it were, and things of that sort. What are you doing? What's working? Oh, really? That didn't work for you, but it worked for us. Well, what was the unique spin that you added to make sure that that worked rather than the way we did it? So we're constantly sharing back and forth. I mean, this really has to be a time of flexibility, and it really needs to be a time of considering alternatives.
Mhm.
It really does.
That's good. What did we, you mentioned bingo.
Yeah.
Bingo was a huge fundraiser for the synagogue, and obviously had to be curtailed because of the pandemic. Is there any thoughts to how it's going to be recreated again? Because part of bingo is sitting tightly next to each other. Have they talked about that at all?
Well, I can tell you that from what I've been told from synagogue lay leadership, the State Gaming Commission, is not allowing bingo at this time, because you're right. People sit in close proximity, physical proximity to one another. Our hope is that we'll be able to reopen bingo to some kind of playership come January. But we were under no illusion that it was going to be any sooner than January.
You'll just have to have your face masks on.
What it could be, I don't know. We'll see what happens. If what the president said yesterday or the day before is true, and there'll be a vaccine by the end of this year, and the vaccine is reputable and it works and people take it, that'll be a game changer in terms of the ability of people to socialize and be in close physical proximity to one another. And listen, just so you know, I'm not one of these guys that was calling this social distancing, because my feeling is if you social distance, it means you're no longer using Facebook and you're no longer using Twitter and those kinds of, Instagram and those kinds of social media conventions. We're talking about physical distancing, where people need to be 6 feet or more from one another. It really is a physical distancing.
Maybe there's a way to create some plexiglass separators between players. That might work out. I see that being used in various facilities, barbershops, or banks, or whatever. They have these separators that they're using to, and less than 6 feet apart.
Well, you're a Providence, Rhode Island hometown guy, right?
Yes, a long time ago.
Long time ago. So let me tell you, I drove down to Federal Hill a couple of weeks ago, walked into one of the establishments there, and the restaurant was closed for in-building dining. The patio out back was open for dining.
Okay.
The bar was open, and it was very interesting because the bar, you could drink at the bar, you could eat at the bar, you could do both at the bar. There was plexiglass along the whole distance of the bar to separate customers from the bartender.
Okay.
And there were movable plexiglass
separators.
Yeah, but from so if you were a party of three, it could be configured such that your party of three could be together within a little like booth at the bar, and the plexiglass separating the three people from the bartender. If it was two, it could be arranged so two. But if you were single, it could be done single. So, what you're saying, I've seen it too. You see all kinds of things. You go to some of the restaurants, if you're down in Easton by the Farmer's Norder, or you take a drive down Washington Street in Norwood, where the restaurants are located in the center of town, you see restaurants that have, some barricading to that allow sidewalk use up to the road, sometimes right into the road itself, so people will be able to sit and at least dine outside, and it gives the food establishment at least some chance to try to survive. Listen, we see it here in Stoughton too. If you go down to the corner cafe, you see it right there where they have this area right out front with with a tent and barriers around it. You see it down at Zachary's as well. They're not the only ones, but they're the two that are right out there. If you go to Bertucci's over at Cobb's Corner, I don't know if they have dining indoors. I'm sure they do, but they have a courtyard outside. If you're looking at the restaurant just to the left, and you see the courtyard packed with people.
Right. Well, maybe the shields might be a good idea to think about, because you got to get that bingo going again if it's possible. And I'm sure there's a lot of people out there who are itching to get back and playing it again.
Yeah, and with bingo, it's not just you can look at it solely as a fundraiser, but it isn't. Bingo's a big social,
Sure.
It's a big social hour, as it were. I mean, people come to play for 3-4 hours, but it's a big social outlet for a lot of people.
As long as you don't sit in my seat.
Oh, I have no words.
No.
I have no words. Yeah, people get very protective of their space. That's for sure.
Right.
But listen, it's very true though. It's a social outlet for a lot of people. When we migrated, when we transferred our daily worship over to the Zoom platform months ago, what we would do is we would have evening worship, and then we would leave the control board open, because just like you and I are looking at one another conducting this interview right now, imagine 15 people who've come for evening worship and they're dotted across the screen. And it was really, at that point in time, the only way they could see other people and converse.
Right.
Where I may be seated here in my home office. You may be seated, there in your home office. Okay. Although your background looks a lot better than my overstocked bookcase here. And you only see that one. You should see the lower ones here that are just books all over the floors. And whatnot.
I know. I have to show you how to create the virtual background, Rabbi.
Yeah, well.
Put up the Wailing Wall or something.
Well, I suppose so. But, Rabbi, I think people like to see stocked bookcases. So.
Yeah, they all.
Listen, Roy, you've been in my office. My office is no different than that.
It's home.
Yeah, it's overflowing. But the control panel, as it were, allows people to see one another and talk.
Right. Hey, something, Rabbi? We need to stop talking about the temple and in the coronavirus and all that stuff, and stop talking about something very strange that's recently happened. And that in Washington, there was peace agreements that were signed by Israel and the UAE and Bahrain. And what's going on?
Well, listen, like Trump or dislike Trump, I think it's, you have to acknowledge that what occurred. Well, we're recording. We're interviewing September 15th. What occurred September 14th was nothing more than a sea change, or nothing less than a sea change in the dynamics of the Middle East. There are a number of reasons that undergird what took place and why it took place. But the fact that Trump was able, and his administration was able, to gather two sovereign Arab nations and the sole Jewish nation state together with U.S. involvement to sign an agreement that the Saudi foreign minister, who happens to be a prince, described in his Arabic remarks as Ma'amad Salam, which means a peace treaty, and to be described as a tahdiyah, which means normalization, is something that Israel hasn't seen in the Middle East to this point. In other words, if you take a look at the treaties that Israel has with Egypt and with Jordan, the treaties in and of themselves don't call for full normalization, don't call for and include economic agreements, cultural exchanges, and things of that sort. But as Menachem Begin, the late Prime Minister of Israel, said with regard to the peace treaty with Egypt, and as Yitzhak Rabin said with regard to the peace treaty between Israel and Jordan, a cold peace is better than no peace. These agreements with these peace treaties and normalization agreements between Israel on the one hand and Bahrain and the United Arab Emirates on the others really are on a much different level. And already there are business agreements that are being signed. There are cross-cultural exchanges that honestly are not just in the works, but have already taken place. This is on a much different level. And, and it's not to belittle the existential challenge that the smaller countries along that rim of the Arabian Peninsula feel with regard to the giant across the water, meaning Iran. And, no less so that Israel sees Iran as an implacable enemy as well. And the question becomes, how do you deal with that? As well as the sea change that has come from Turkey under Erdogan's rule since he was elected president in 2003. These agreements really hem in those people, those countries whose leadership act in ways inimical to the continued existence of, nations like the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain, and listen, some of the other smaller ones as well. I mean, President Trump has mentioned that there could be as many as somewhere between 5 and 9 more countries that are going to join the Abraham Accords.
That's good.
Listen,
excellent.
Look, I'm going to tell you, in the Israeli press, September 15th, it was already reported that there's an investment group out of the United Arab Emirates that may be looking to purchase Beitar Yerushalayim, Kadorsal, Beitar Jerusalem, no, Hapoel Jerusalem, one of the prime basketball franchises in the IBL, in the Israeli Basketball League. Okay, and one of the prime franchises, including the storied franchise Maccabi Tel Aviv, all right, to play very successfully on the international level. I mean, Maccabi Tel Aviv has won the European Basketball League championships, I think, 5 times in the past 20 years. I mean, they're just a juggernaut. And, Hapoel Jerusalem really took off when Amari Stoudemire, who used to play in the NBA, moved to Israel, bought a stake in the team, and began attracting real top-level talent to play professional basketball in Jerusalem. So you have all of this taking place, announced yesterday morning. So this preceded the actual signatures to the treaties and other agreements, normalization agreements as well. A completely new curriculum was introduced into the school system in the United Arab Emirates in Bahrain, one that we would probably call a peace curriculum. So this is just a sea change, and I think it really boils down to the existential threat that Iran posed to a lot of these smaller principalities along the Arabian Gulf, where they're able to take a look and say, hey, that giant across the water threatens us. That giant across the water threatens Israel. Israel has never threatened us. Maybe we need to see what's happening west. And economically, Israel to the Middle East is what Silicon Valley is to the United States in terms of what it does.
We should do a show sometime and just be able to tell the audience what kind of products are coming out of Israel, what kind of inventions, what kind of medical miracles are coming out of that little country.
Well, let's just throw something out there right now. This treatment, the announced treatment for COVID that came out about 6-8 weeks ago, remdesivir. Okay, well, it's interesting that the company that developed it has a lot of Israeli connections. Okay, and a lot of your generic drugs happen to be manufactured by Teva Pharmaceuticals, which happens to be an Israeli pharmaceutical company, down to the platforms that people use when it comes to these little devices right here.
Yeah.
Okay. If you have a cell phone that has a camera in it, you can thank Israel for that.
That's amazing.
Yeah. It's just, who was it that described Israel? Israel's like a battleship for the United States, doesn't need refueling, whatnot. It's like that kind of thing, if you put it in military terms. A complete laboratory for, and listen, I'll be honest with you, if you take a look at Israel's nickname is the innovation nation.
Justifiably so.
Yeah,
That's amazing.
If you have cars in this country that have eyesight, Subaru has it in their cars, that enables your car to tell the distance between you and the car in front of you. Are you staying within your lane? Is there an obstruction ahead of you? Those kinds of things. All that was developed out of Israel. All of it.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, all of it's developed out of Israel.
Well, I foresee a lot of, like you said, there's probably 5 or 6 more countries that are waiting to jump in line and become part of this the treaty that's going on. Maybe they're starting to realize that it's better to get along than to be an adversary, and I'm thrilled to see it. I wish there was some way to get through to the Hamas. They're still the bad boys over there.
Well, look, I can tell you, I made a presentation to a discussion group last night, as a matter of fact, and I said, you shouldn't be surprised by this. The groundwork for all this began to be laid back in 2017, and there were a number of decisions that the current administration took that I think really led to this point that we saw with these peace treaties between Israel, the UAE, and Bahrain. So this was not something that occurred overnight, and this was not something that occurred within the past 3 months. The groundwork had been laid. And isn't it interesting that for the past 70 years or so, that the mainstream thinking had been, Israel needs to give up something if there's to be peace. So the formula that was struck, everybody has heard, land for peace. Okay. That was the formula. And, indeed, after 1948, after Israel's war for independence, there was a proposal that was put forward that, let's see if we can negotiate peace between Egypt and Israel if Israel would give up the Negev desert. Okay, that southern triangle, as it were, that comes to a point down in Eilat. Give that up and turn it over to Egypt. And yeah, that would really the formation of this land for peace equation under which the State Department and a lot of diplomats had worked for decades. And here you come to this agreement that was signed, on September 14th, and what the quid pro quo was? This is what I said last night. The quid pro quo was peace for peace.
Okay.
How is it? This is what I said last night. I said, how is it? Think about this. How is it that it was a real estate developer, his real estate investment son-in-law, and a real estate attorney were able to sit down and say, what was working in the past wasn't working. Is there a new model for this? And then be able to lay the groundwork for this extension. Now, what this extension does is it goes around the Palestinians, around Hamas, around Fatah, around the Palestinian Authority. Said, listen, when really it says, you don't want to sit and discuss these kinds of issues? Fine. Well, there are other countries in the Middle East and other peoples in the Middle East who may not have the same axe to grind, and we're going to discuss with them. And what this agreement does is, it puts pressure, I think, and I'm by no means a political, well, I shouldn't say that. I am a political scientist. I have my master's, I have a dual master's degree in international affairs and economics. But I think what it does is, it puts a lot of pressure on the Palestinian Authority and Mahmoud Abbas and another of other elements in the leadership of Palestinian society to say, hey, look, time is passing you by, and you wouldn't sit at the table. So your embassy in Washington has been closed. So the funding for U.S. funding for the United Nations Relief Works Agency has been suspended. Recognition of Jerusalem as the capital of Israel has taken place. Recognition of the annexation, Israel's annexation of the Golan, which, by the way, by Israeli law took place in 1981 or 82. It's a done deal. So, it might be to your benefit to come to the table now. Of course, the rejection front amongst the Palestinians, Hamas, the evening of the 14th into the 15th was lobbing rockets over into Israel, and Israel struck back. So we'll see what's happening. And listen, Israeli military might is nothing to sneeze at. There have been covert operations that have taken place. There have been overt operations that have taken place. And they haven't let up with regard to trying to strike at enemies of Israel, who seek Israel's destruction.
I hope they can have a meeting of the minds. It's enough already.
Yeah, listen, as my daughter said, she said, look, it may be a sea change. Time will tell. Let's see how this plays out. But certainly, more than the optics, okay, the actual guts of this look pretty good right now.
I hope so. I was digging up some facts about Israel. The population of the whole country, which I'm not sure how it stacks up comparison-wise to one of the states in the United States. Like, does it stack up size-wise to Texas, or is Texas bigger than it?
Oh, Texas. Israel, geographically, Israel has approximately the same land square miles as the state of New Jersey.
Okay, and their
population just tipped over 9 million. Okay,
well,
when the state of Israel came into being, roughly 75% of the state of Israel in 1948-49 was Jewish. That percentage has remained approximately the same. It's a bit higher now, I think.
Yeah, I've been reading the emails from Israel, and the numbers I saw, maybe they're incorrect. They said the Jewish population is 6.8 million people, and like you said, it's 74% of the total population. What makes up the other 26?
Well, you have roughly 20% is Arab, okay, or you, you have some other smaller religious groupings that are part of it. I mean, you're going to talk about 18 to 20% in Muslim. You have, interesting, the Christian population of Israel when it became a state in 1948, with 36,000 Christians in the entire state of Israel. Today, the Christian population is upwards of 170,000. It's the only state in the Middle East that has had an increase in its Christian population over the past 7 decades.
Really. Those,
Really.
the facts that I was telling you about, they forecast by the end of 2024, which is what, 4 years away from now, they're projecting 10 million citizens.
Yep.
2048, they're projecting 15 million. And by 2065, 20 million.
Yep.
They're careful about the percentage of Israelis versus foreigners, aren't they?
Well, listen, if you're Jewish, if you can prove that you had one Jewish grandparent, you can claim, you can move to Israel and apply for immediate citizenship under the law of return.
Yeah.
Now, people ask, why is it that designation? Well, under the Nazis, if a person had one Jewish grandparent, according to the laws of racial purity and the Nuremberg laws, that person was considered a Jew, which meant lost business, lost property, lost profession, all this kind of stuff. And eventually, we know where that led.
Right.
Led to internment, death camps, death, etc. Okay. And along those, and people argue the numbers, but can argue till the cows come home. Approximately 6 million Jews were killed in that, okay? Set for extermination, the extermination of a people. So that's why the formula for the law of return was, if you had one Jewish grandparent, you can claim, all right? It just so happens that most of the people who immigrate to Israel, okay, happen to be people who have had considered to be Jewish by birth from Jewish mothers or whatnot, or converted. All right. There is a subpopulation in Israel that have a Jewish parent, but the father, according to Judaism, you're Jewish if your mother's Jewish. There's a large number of Jews who immigrated, or people who immigrated from the former Soviet Union, who happen to fall in this nether category where, they're not non-Jews, but they're not Jews because of consanguinity, bloodlines within the family, and what to do with them and things of that sort. I mean, they've been accepted into Israel, they serve in the army, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. They're full-fledged citizens. I don't want anybody to think that there's some kind of apartheid going on. Israel's not an apartheid state. You have full integration of Jews of all skin tones. And people should know, when somebody says, well, what does a Jew look like? You go to Israel. You're going to find Jews with skin tones as Caucasian as you and I have. You're going to have Jews, approximately 180,000 Jews from Ethiopia there, okay, with that skin tone and olive skin tone and whatnot. You have Jews and non-Jews sitting on the Jews and Arabs sitting on Israel's Supreme Court. Miss Israel, okay, was an Arab Christian, as a matter of fact. They've had Arab Muslims as well. There's nothing apartheid about Israel at all.
Everybody gets along.
Listen, Israel has its issues. I'm not saying it's a perfect place. It's got its issues like most countries does, but Israel is an immigrant nation. There are only a couple of countries in the world that can claim to be immigrant nations.
Right.
And I'll tell you who they are. I may miss one or two. Canada, the United States, Australia. Even New Zealand is not a complete immigrant nation because of the large number of Maoris that survived discovery by the British, and the British, what became British immigration into New Zealand. But maybe, all right, for argument's sake, let's put New Zealand in there. What other country can claim this? Israel.
Amazing.
You have people from 120 different countries, part of the national makeup in Israel today, meaning their countries of origin.
Right. I find it very interesting that out of a country with almost 7 million people, that the death toll from coronavirus as of what, today or yesterday, according to what I read, was 1,163 people.
Yeah, but per capita, the infection rate is one of the highest in the world.
Okay.
Okay, so listen, Israel's going to go into a three-week lockdown come Rosh Hashanah, come the Jewish New Year.
Right.
Okay, to try to slow the spread. And there's been a lot written about what's going on. The fact of the matter is Jewish culture is a very social culture. Our life cycle events are all social events, open to the community and things of that sort. So if you come from that kind of socialization and you grew up with it, this kind of physical distancing becomes quite difficult. And you put that into the mix, and there are other factors as well, but I don't know as if people should really be so surprised about what's taking place with regard to infection rates. However, Israel being as innovative as it is, treatments are developed to try to combat, this particular virus, fast and furiously over there.
Right. Listen, I hate to say this, we are out of time. I really enjoyed having you on. I was hoping we'd fill up a half an hour, but how wrong I was, especially knowing you as I do. But I want to thank you very, very much for your conversation. I know you want to take about 15 seconds and wish everybody a happy New Year.
That's right. Listen, everybody, a happy and a healthy, and let's hope, and an uplifting and non-lockdown 5781.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Rabbi. And thanks also to TJ Mullen, Rob Rotella, Mike Hammond, and Dave Young at the studio for helping to put this show together. This is Roy Cohen saying thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed having the Rabbi on and talking with him. And we'll see you again soon. Bye-bye now.